At this time, we start the Finance Committee meeting. Agenda item number 2.1, review and discussion regarding MOU between San Benito CISD and TSTC MAARS.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We usually go out for, some of our migrant students will be included in a summer program. For 6 weeks, migrant students are allowed to earn some credit through TSTC. We do have an MOU that we take yearly, and I do have Mr. Perez here in case anybody has any questions. I will let you know that Mr. Weller is still reviewing this contract, or the memorandum of understanding, excuse me. And he does have some proposed changes that we are still working through at this point.
Good evening, Board. Like Ms. Feta said, we do bring programs around this time of the year for board approval because this is the time we'll also start recruiting students to go to these programs in the summer. We usually have two that come to us. It's usually UTRGV with the MUSE program and TSTC with the MARS program. They're very similar in program, and as of right now, we only have MARS. I know MUSE last year, they did not go with a program last summer because of COVID, and TSTC decided to do one virtually. Well, this year, they're going back to doing it in person. One of the small aspects of the MARS program is that the students, our migrant students, have the opportunity to make up high school credits or get ahead because of travel, because they're going to be going off to work or their families are off to work. But the bigger part of this is that the students, they stay at TSTC for 6 weeks. So they're housed there. It's a little pricey. It's $5,000 per student. We usually allocate around $100,000. I usually separate that, anticipating that we can get 20 students. Last year we had 17 participate. The year before that we did have 20 when it was face-to-face. So we do allocate those funds for their summer programs. The other thing with the MARS program, this is what usually entices the students, is that TSTC will pay them $100 every 2 weeks, and then if they can complete the whole course, do everything right, then they get an extra $1,000. So it's a great program for the kids. I know Mr. Weller did have some concerns with the MOU. I already reached out to TSTC, asked them for a Word version of it so we can make some changes and then present it back to them if you all decide to go with it. So.
It is a very good program. I've experienced that before with my former students at a previous school district, and it's a phenomenal program and great benefit to our migrant students.
It is.
Any other questions, comments? No. So this becomes an agenda item. 2.2, review and discussion to award a contract for delinquent tax collection services to Limeburger, Gogan, Blair, and Samson LLP.
Yes, ma'am. We have asked Ms. Monica Solis to join us. She's going to go over the agreement that we have with them, along with the delinquent taxes that they have helped us collect over the last 3 years. Ms. Solis?
Thank you, Ms. Vicky. Thank you, members of the board. So what we currently have in place, and actually the contract that we have with San Benito ISD for collections has now expired, and we're on a month-to-month basis. But previous to that, we had a 3-year contract. And so what I brought before you is the collection figures for the previous 3 years in the representation of San Benito. So if you take a look at the previous 3 years, we've got from 2018 to 2019, we did over $1,140,000 in collections for that year. And then we had in 2019 to 2020, we had $1,074,456 in collections. Now, that was kind of when COVID started, so we saw just a slight decrease, but because of that, we went ahead and started a collection procedure that we knew that was needed for San Benito so that we wouldn't continue to see that decrease. And because of that, you can see the increase for 2020 and 2021, where we had over $1,303,574 in collections. That was actually a record-setting year for San Benito. Yeah, we've actually done really well. If you'll take a look at the years, on there, you'll see we've collected 34%, 32%, and 36% of the adjusted delinquent tax roll. So, I mean, that's excellent collections. We're on track for the 2021-2022 year, what we've already collected, to probably match that 36%, if maybe not even go over. We're looking to to possibly just continue the contract with San Benito ISD so that we can continue the plan that we've set into action. And we are asking San Benito to place this item on the agenda so that we can get a contract awarded and continue these services.
Dr. Carmen, are there any other companies that do this type of work in the area?
I am aware of one other company. If there are additional, I'm not aware.
What was that?
I'm aware of one additional company. There could be others, but I'm not aware of any more. So I'm aware of a total of 2, counting Limeburger.
How long have we been working with Limeburger?
I'm not sure how far back the contract goes. I can tell you that as far as 13 years that I have been with the firm, I know that we have represented San Benito ISD, and as far as collections, how much further more than that, I'm not sure, but I could get you that answer.
For years.
Years.
Many
Years.
years. I was on board when we had you guys also.
I have a comment to make. You know, since I've been on board, I know we've looked into this prior, and all I have to say is that you guys have done a tremendous job, and you guys have really gone out and above on providing us a great service. I know our administration is extremely pleased with you all, and it's very obvious that you guys are providing a great job. I mean, I really don't see a need to change at this moment in time. So I would venture to say that we put it on the agenda.
Second.
We're not voting on it.
No, I know, I'm just saying it as a, I'm just saying because of all the progress that they're showing, that's why I should have just said that I am in agreement also, that
I agree.
makes you guys happy.
Is there anybody that wants to go out for RFQs? If not, we can put this on the agenda.
No.
If I
Okay.
may add, this does need to be 2 separate agenda items. There is a new Texas code that, Ms. Elise, would you mind shedding some light on that?
Yes, so actually, there is a new code that was enacted under the government code that basically calls for a certain notice requirement for any contingent fee contract. This was done probably shortly after the last contract that we received from San Benito ISD. And on there does need to be a finding made by the school district, and we've provided that language to Ms. Vicky, Dr. Carmen for review. And the finding is basically just saying that there's a substantial need in order for San Benito ISD to hire Limeburger, because we do offer a specialized service, that the attorneys that are currently in place, that this is probably not something that they can normally do for San Benito ISD. This is a different specialized service. And so that finding is detailed. So Ms. Vicky's correct as far as it being a 2-part. So the notice requirement would be posted alongside the agenda, similar to that of I'm sorry, what's that? I heard you say something. Similar to that of the posting of the meeting requirements, that notice would be, and the finding would also need to be made by the school district prior to the awarding of any contract. And so that's why she says this is a 2-part.
And that document, that finding document is attached onto board docs right now so that y'all can review it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Felice.
So that becomes an agenda item, and you all, the district will handle on putting the correct verbiage on the next agenda.
Yes, ma'am.
Agenda item 2.3, review and discussion regarding feasibility report lowering 2022-23 tax rate.
Is there a clicker? So I put together some information on what our tax rate looks like right now and what it's going to take to consider lowering the tax rate. So as a reminder, our tax rate total is, for every $100 valuation, it's 1.3049. 0.2799 of that is for interest and sinking, those are our bond payments. And 1.025 is for maintenance and operations, which is what it takes to make sure that our school is functioning. So I'm gonna go back and forth as we talk about it. So the debt rate, these are some key points that we need to remember. The debt rate that we need to be able to cover the cost does need to be met. So if we say we need $7.5 million, we need to make sure that we set that tax rate for the INS at that exact rate. The next thing to note is that we've had a change in the state laws that says that we cannot move from M&O over to INS, which we have done in the past. I think we calculated like 7 years worth was $21 million that we had moved from general fund over into INS. That is no longer allowed. So the state is making sure that we are setting that tax rate at the exact amount that we absolutely need. So when we talk about tax rates, when we talk about the INS, that one is definitely a non-negotiable. If the tax rate reduces if the district reduces the tax rate by more than what TEA suggests, there can be some penalties as to what the state is going to give us, and that's just basically saying, like, if we tell TEA we only need this amount, there's going to be this amount reduced. But that's not the only. There is an exception to that. If we have an excess of 2.5% growth in our property values, which historically we have had about 5% historically, then we can increase by a very small margin. And so on the next sheet, I do have some scenarios of what it might look like. And please understand that these are very, very preliminary, considering this has nothing to do with next year's property values. It has nothing to do with anything other than the information that we have right now. So if we look at the percent of increase in the county appraisal district values, if we look at the 4 to 5% area, that shows that we might be able to decrease the reduction total by, at the very, very most, 2 cents without being affected by TEA's funding. This is considering also that we have a steady tax base, if we have a steady growth value. The unfortunate part about that is that when we do our budget, we do it in June. We approve in June. Those property values don't come out until July, so we don't know. We can plan very conservatively and then do it again after that, but our budget has to be planned very conservatively to begin with, and then we go and approve our tax rates in September at the very latest. So a couple of things that we might see in the future for tax relief is that there is a proposition to increase the homestead exemption from $25,000 to $40,000. So that sounds really great for our taxpayers, and I'm really happy about that. However, when you go and give that much of an exemption, it lowers our overall tax base. So just to give you an example, this is off of the appraisal district report that we use. This is our information, by the way. So that $1.7 billion, that's our initial appraisal value. The homestead of $8.3 million, that's the one that's at $25,000 homestead exemption. If that homestead exemption increases and they vote for that, that homestead cap is going to increase and our net taxable will decrease. So if we have a decreased net tax, that means we can only tax on that amount. So if we have a $100,000 home, we're currently taxing $75,000 of it because they have a $25,000 homestead exemption. If that changes, that means we're only going to tax 60% of that because it's going to increase, or $60,000. So that information is just a little bit too much up in the air for us to predict at this time right now. But I do want to give you a timeline of what we do on our end as far as tax rates are concerned. So in April, they do give us a preliminary amount of what our property values are. That preliminary amount is sent out and they give out the opportunity for us to appeal it. Those appeals are not considered until July. The certified values come out on July 25th to be exact. After that, they give that information over to TEA, and TEA is the one that actually says, okay, based off of this information, your maximum compressed rate is going to be this amount. That's what drives the portion of our tax rate. Then September 30th is the last day that we can look at what our tax rates are going to be. So when we adopt in September. So when we do our budget, we do it with as much information as we possibly can at that time. So a couple of things to note as we go forward and we look at those tax rates. April will be the time when we can get preliminary values. We can give y'all some scenarios on what it would look like. What maybe half a cent, a quarter of a cent, maybe 1 cent, 1.5 cents, however we can do it. But that also does not include the fact that we will have the certified values until July, and we might have to go and look at it again. And if we change our tax rates, we're going to have to amend our budget, which is okay. We also need to take into consideration that we do have a new budget coming in, and I understand that there are some wish lists that we might want to include. If we have that might have a little bit of a factor on if we have this much expense, we're going to have this much of revenue. So if we're trying to lower our tax rate, it is going to lower our revenue. So we need to make sure that we're driving towards a common goal, and that way we have exactly what we need to be able to fund that. So those are a couple of things that we need to take into consideration. The other things that we need to take into consideration are ADA. That is always going to be a very big concern for us. We don't know how to predict that anymore. When I first started doing school finance, it was consistent. You get the last 5 years average and you put that number. There is no way to calculate that, and it's something that changes, obviously, as the wind blows. So, yes, sir.
So, Ms. Vicky, so just brief us real quick on this whole situation, because I know, once again, this whole, ADA changed because of COVID and all this other stuff, and it's not a cookie cutter operation anymore like it used to be. But can you just explain a little bit of how, if we reduce the taxes, or how can we sustain it for the long haul? Like, how can you reduce it, not have the same revenue coming in, and then sustain it for 2 or 3 years without having to increase it again, and forecast the increase? Because we haven't increased in, 8 years?
We have not increased as long as I've been here, so yeah.
Yeah, so going backwards is even, how long can we sustain that?
It's nice to have it go backwards, but it looks ugly when you have to go back to a higher rate. It's a lot, it's more acceptable to have a constant rate.
Exactly.
So it's
In
just
my
not
opinion.
feasible at this time?
At this very moment, I won't be able to answer that, but as we progress through our budget process, I can give y'all some more information, and I can show you exactly what it's gonna look like, what it'll impact, how it might affect our revenues, and where we need to be, where we are. At this point, this is very, very preliminary. Ms. Lopez, you had asked for a feasibility report. Was there something else that you had in mind, or did you need additional information?
So a feasibility report would give you more details as to what is doable and what is not doable for our district. How, if there were to be a tax cut that we give to our taxpayers, how that would help us to still be able to manage the district. Is there spending that the district can cut down on, right? Or is there some kind of a break that we can give to our taxpayers, especially right now with a lot of people losing their homes or their jobs because of the pandemic and so forth. We have a 13,000 median income in our city, even though a lot of people are professionals, right? But the median income is only 13,000, and they're paying a mortgage of almost $1,000 a month, And so how can we be fiscally responsible with our taxpayer money, trying to see if we can help our taxpayers in our city while at the same time still be able to be efficient and effective in our programs in the schools without harming our student learning or our staff. So I know you mentioned we haven't had a tax increase, and we haven't since 2014, and which is great, you know, but if we can do even more for our taxpayers who are funding our schools and cutting down somewhat, I mean, just, if we look at Los Fresnos ISD, they're paying 1.18, and we're paying 1.3049 on our taxes. Harlingen ISD is paying 1.17, and I know that we're not, you've made it perfectly clear, we're not comparing apples to apples in just by looking at the tax rate, right? But what can we do to save on costs as a district? Because just because we do have the money doesn't mean that we should overspend if we don't need to overspend. If we can protect our tax dollars also and protect our community, help our community out while still being able to be a successful school district, you know, that's why I think that having a feasibility report so we can look at the actual numbers, you know, I know you mentioned maybe talking to TASBO and see if they can do anything like that, or what kind of professional company can we hire so we could look at these numbers, so we could look at the data, bring you the resources that you need, you know, so that way, as a board, we can decide if we want to go through it or not, you know, and bring down the tax rate for our community members. We have that $40 million bond that we're going to pay into for the next 20-something years, you know. What can we do for our community in the low poverty area? I know that our enrollment has gone down, but yet our expenses have gone up. You know, from 2012, our expenses were at 113 million, and right now we're at 134 million. Is there something the district can do to cut down on things that we don't need, you know, so we can save our taxpayers money also?
I have to admit that saving money is not something that I think of in my position. My general role here is to make sure that our students are getting as much as possible. And quite honestly, I am in the business of spending money on our students. So that whole concept of saving money is really foreign to me, especially with as healthy of a fund balance as we have right now. I don't believe that there is a company that can come in and do those kinds of numbers or do specifically that. TASBO does help out. We do contract with the Center of Finance Excellence through TASBO, and they are very good about checking what we're working on, making sure that whatever numbers we're using are indeed the ones that need to be in those slots, because it's a very intricate formula. So we will continue working with them. I know we have a budget workshop coming up in March and April and in May. So as we move forward, and I can tell you with all certainty that May is probably going to be the time where I can get you those scenarios. Yes, sir.
Ma'am, I got a comment or a question. It's more of a comment. But I know, you know, you hit on a couple of good points. It's very difficult right now with the feasibility because you're not getting the right information. I mean, you're not getting accurate information, and it's kind of skewed once again about the data that's being skewed because the ADA is all over the place. You know, so we're struggling right now to try to you know, promote the school district so our kids can come back and provide safety and, you know, so on and so forth, right, to allow the kids to come back. So, but, you know, so right now it's very difficult to see what we can do to you know, to continue to save or help our community and our taxpayers when we are suffering here too. You know, yeah, we got some ESSER funds and stuff like that, but that's to sustain the school district in you know, in operation. So it's just a very difficult time right now to you know, to understand this whole dynamics as far as trying to reduce the tax rate when everybody's been affected across the board equally. Bless you, ma'am. So I understand. I see your point. I see everybody's point. But I think right now it's very difficult to get that data that you're asking for because it's pretty difficult right now because it's all pretty much inaccurate to say the least, to predict or forecast, you know, what we can do in the future when everybody's struggling right now.
It's an interesting situation. I've never seen finances like this. But we do have a lot of resources that we can tap into so that as we go into it, we'll be able to talk about those issues and those kinds of opportunities that we can take advantage of. So
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
Yes,
Thanks,
ma'am,
ma'am.
thank you.
As we-
And
If I could just add real quickly, as we go forward with this process, I think Mrs. Pettis is going to bring from the summary of finances, and there'll be an estimate on ADA. But if we're expecting a revenue source here, has to balance out with our expenditures. And historically, the last several years, we've done a really good job in providing salaries and benefits for our employees. We've taken on special projects, even this year, if the tennis court doesn't fall through, for example, what we've done with our police department, for example. And I know there are a couple of other projects being considered for next year. At the end of the day, we've provided a high-quality, gold standard education, and we're the Greyhounds. If we were a lesser, mascot trying to provide like a salamander or something type of education, then that'd be different. But we're not. We're Greyhounds, and we've done well for our kids. But that'll be what you have to evaluate, really, at the end of the day. What can be cut? What is worth cutting? What doesn't cut into our kids or our employees?
Right.
And it'll be difficult, but I think Mrs. Pettis can get us some numbers here from the summary of finance as we get to that point. So, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you,
ma'am.
Dr. Carmen.
Thank you, Ms. Pettis.
Yes. And the number one priority is providing the quality education for our kids. Any questions, comments, concerns? At this time, we adjourn Finance Committee meeting at 7:05.